right, Sean Zattel here with middleweight contender Jalil Hackett, now fighting in New York City at the theater in Madison Square Garden on that Berlanga card and Richardson Hitchens doubleheader, fighting Sergey Derevianchenko. Jalil, a guy who's only lost to championship caliber fighters. You look at all six of his losses, pretty much competitive in all six of those fights, all against the top guys. So how much are you viewing this fight as a step-up fight, even though he is 40 years old, but still been in there tough with the best of the best? And is this a measuring stick fight for you?
No, definitely, it's a huge step up. First off, I like to thank Zufa, and I like to thank Sergey for taking this fight. A guy of his caliber with his resume, he could have easily said, I'm not fighting a young guy. You know, he's early in his career. I don't get anything out of it. He could have said that, and nobody would have been mad. But he took the fight. He said, "Let's do it." So, he's giving a young guy like myself an opportunity to show that I'm ready to step up to the next level.
None of those guys were able to stop Sergey Derevianchenko. Even Mabili, who at super middleweight, him really fighting a bigger guy out of his weight. Is that in your mind at all in this fight to be the first man to put him away?
Yeah, it's in my mind, but the main goal is to go out there and leave the ring with my hand raised. That's the main goal. You know, you go out there looking for a stoppage, you might leave with a loss. So, we're not forcing anything. We're just gonna go out there, follow the game plan that we've been putting together this whole camp, and we're gonna come out victorious.
You now El Negro Mexicano. You're the black Mexican man. What made you finally decide that's what I'm going with?
So for the longest, growing up in the amateurs, like all the guys in the amateurs, like, yeah, this black guy, but he fight, he come forward, he come to fight, he fight like a Mexican. And so in the amateurs, they like, yeah, Jalil the black Mexican. And so like it was just like something small. But then like, recently as a pro, I just sat back and I thought about it. And I say a lot of the times when we see a Hispanic fighter or realistically a non-black fighter, if they're a pressure fighter, they come forward, they take some punches, but they give a lot of punches back. We always look at them, that's a tough guy and tough fighter, harder of a lion. But then when you think of black fighters that fight that way, it's always the stigma of, oh, he gets hit too much and this, that, and the third. And I just came to the realization of not every black fighter is going to be Floyd or Sugar Ray Leonard. So the best way to put it for me is, I'm the black Mexican. I'm black. My skin is black. But I come out there to fight hard and fight with the pride of a Mexican fighter. Like Julio Cesar Chavez or Canelo Alvarez or something like that.
You've sparred a lot of top fighters ever since you were a teenager, man. Who have you been sparring as of late in preparation for this fight?
For this fight, we've been getting a lot of, in-house work. When I say in-house, as in like the DMV area, because this is the hotbed for, talent, especially in the pros. We got a lot of undefeated guys, coming up in the ranks. We even got DC guys signed to Zufa. Shout out to Nasheed Smith and, Patrick O'Connor. He's also fighting in August in the Cardin Island. So, yeah, it's been a lot of in-house work to prepare for this fight.
How's it been seeing that DMV scene just explode? Because years ago it was the Peterson brothers. Oh shit, what happened? Oh, you still there? My bad. I don't know what happened
Yeah,
there. Yeah,
yeah, I'm
because
good.
years ago it was the Peterson brothers, but now like even in the amateur scenes, Marcus Luther, Carmel Moulton coming out of there. We saw Scooter Davis on TNT this past week. Gervonta, obviously, yourself. And yeah, how's that been to see that explode? And what would you say are the trademarks of fighters that come out of that region?
It's a toughness, is a very small region, and once upon a time back in, before I was born in the 90s, we once had five world champions in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. isn't big. People have to remember for it to be five world champions to come from this area, not even just saying the D.C., Maryland, Virginia, but Washington, D.C., it was five world champions in Washington, D.C. at one point. It just shows you how talented this small area is. Most people will compare DC to states. They don't even compare us to other cities. They'll say, "Oh, DC got a lot of good fighters like California," whereas if they compared us to like a smaller region of maybe California or another big state like Texas, then it would be like, man, DC might have a lot more talent than those places.
This was your first fight with Andre Ward on the call, and I would think as a fighter, one benefit of that is Andre is critiquing you as you go along and giving advice during the fight itself on what this fighter could do better, that fighter is doing well, and what. Did you take anything when you had a rewatch of your last fight?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I definitely sat down, rewatched it, definitely listened to what he was saying and took heed to it. A lot of guys can't take constructive criticism. And I really like the way he constructively criticized what I was doing. He touched on the things that I was doing good, but he also criticized a few things that he would kind of, touch up.
Where did you agree with him at, and where did that make an imprint? Getting back to the drawing board after this last win.
I agree with him 1,000% on everything he said because he's been somewhere that I have not been, and I want to get where he's been. So I agree with him 1,000% on everything he said. So I definitely went back to the drawing board, you know, tightened up some things, and come July 26th, you're gonna see a whole new product.
It seemed like the main takeaway from him was there's a way to retain that volume, that aggressive style, while getting hit less. And did you is has that been a point of emphasis in this camp?
A little, yes, it's definitely been one of the main points, realistically, and like I said, once again, July 26th, I feel like this is gonna be a special one.
How much better do you feel at 60 as opposed to when you were getting down to 47? I know the last fight was at 57, but how do you feel at middleweight these days?
It feels tremendous. This will be my first official fight at 160. I've been telling people I haven't fought at 160 yet. So this will be the first official fight at 160. It's been very, very, very easy to make. Huge shout out to Zufa with, supplying me with all the supplements that I need to make sure my body's prepared throughout camp. And also shout out to the UFC PI Ignite meals. That those meals have made camp much, much, much more easier. So yeah, I'm feeling strong, feeling ready to go, and I can't wait till fight night.
Let me ask you, man, because you obviously spent a good amount of time earlier in your career in the Mayweather gym in Vegas. Did you ever get any rounds in with Rolly Romero as well?
No, no. We were supposed to work like 3 years ago when Tank was getting ready to fight Ryan. We were training at Floyd's gym for the first few weeks of camp, and me and Rolly were supposed to work, but we ended up not working.
How do you see his fight going with Teofimo?
I think he knocks Teofimo out.
Why is that?
Rolly just, I don't know, ever since he's got with Coach Salas, I feel like he's like tuned it up. So it's like a little bit more sharper. He's always been a heavy handed guy. So him being a heavy handed guy and is a little bit more sharper, I think, yeah, I think he's definitely going to go out there and get a knockout.
You know, Teofimo, he is the favorite. And when they showed the sparring session when they were young, lightweights, Teo was hurting him to the body and stuff. But are you saying you think under Salas, like he's a more patient, disciplined fighter now, and it'll go different in part because of that reason?
No, absolutely, absolutely. That reason and experience. He's not the same guy that he was back then. Leading up to the fight with Abdullah Mason and Albert Bell, everyone said, well, Albert Bell used to get out on Abdullah, and if you dig deeper, he was getting out on a 15-year-old. And this is a different era now, different time. Time changes, people change.
Right. That was Rolly with just 5 or 6 years of experience in boxing, and now all these years later, he's uh, been boxing over a decade now. So you think that makes a difference?
It makes a huge difference.
So yeah, but you said you had no hesitation on that. You're like Rolly by knockout, no hesitation. What?
Yeah, I feel like I study both guys. I've seen both guys in the past couple fights, and I think I like Rolly by knockout, because Teofimo is a he's a very slick boxer, but he's a very confident guy. And if he's confident in the fact that he'll beat you, he's willing to take chances that he probably shouldn't take. And I think that might set him up to get knocked out.
What's going back to Derevianchenko for a minute here, man? What's the key to breaking him down? Is it going to be those body shots, the volume, just kind of being you, just doing what you do anyways?
Youth, youth will be youth will be the key to success. You can't undo 40. You know, 40 is 40. And 2023 is 23. It doesn't matter what you were, it's about what you are now. And right now, I'm young, I'm in my prime athletically, physically, and it's just all about showing that come July 26th.
Lastly, Jaleel, the guy you reminded me of first seeing you, like if we were going to compare you as a prospect to the champion level, it was Errol Spence. Just that you're right-handed as opposed to him being southpaw. And even watching you in your last fight against Cruz Jr., it was like this guy still reminds me of Errol Spence with the busy jab and the body work and the pressure. Um, do you think he'll still have enough coming off 3 years to beat Tim Tszyu later this month, a day before you fight on the Zuffa show?
I definitely do think he'll have enough. Growing up and to this day, Earl's one of my favorite fighters. So I'm definitely rooting for him. To go out there and get the W. I'm happy to see him back in the ring. Like me and him have had conversations in the past. Even if he didn't get back in the ring, he's still hell of a fighter, Hall of Fame resume if you ask me. And you know, I think he's gonna go out there and get a win come July 25th.
Did you guys ever talk about that? The similarities that you had to him stylistically? Did he ever talk to you about that?
Yeah, we talk often, and he always gives me pointers and stuff. So I definitely appreciate him for that.
All right, Jaleel, man, thank you again. July 26th, Madison Square Garden Theater. Is there anything else people should know before you get out of here?
Man, I think everybody should know that this is gonna be an action-packed card from the very beginning to the very end. So y'all make sure y'all get in there early. For the prelims, you got guys like, Troy Nash on the prelims. That's my guy. Shout out to Troy. And then, on the main card, you got me, you got Richardson Hitchens, and you got, Edgar Berlanga, who always gives a good show when he fights. So definitely make sure y'all tune in July 26th, live on Paramount Plus and at Madison Square Garden Theater.